19. Black actors that vanished and were never seen again. Imagine being the most famous face in the room, and the next morning, a ghost. Not retired, not disgraced, just gone. One walked away from $1 million role and an Oscars promise to disappear into fashion. One broke a glass ceiling at Saturday Night Live in 1980, then erased herself so completely there are no photos, no interviews, nothing after 1984. One funk legend who electrified Woodstock spent his final decades as a recluse. Some chose the silence to save themselves. Some were stolen by tragedy far too soon. 19 stars who vanished, and the real reasons why. Stay to the very end, because the last name will haunt you. And subscribe to Secret Celebrity Stories, where no legend is ever truly forgotten. Lauryn Hill. Some artists disappear because the world stops calling. Lauryn Hill disappeared because she stopped answering. And it remains the most debated retreat in modern music. In 1998, at just 23, she released The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, an album so complete that it won 5 Grammy Awards in a single night, including Album of the Year, the first hip-hop record ever to do so. She had already conquered film, stealing scenes in Sister Act 2 as the reluctant choir prodigy, and conquered music with the Fugees, whose album The Score sold over 22 million copies worldwide. She stood at the exact center of American culture, with Hollywood and the record industry both begging for more. And then she walked away from nearly all of it. She turned down massive film offers, retreated from the machinery of celebrity, and poured herself into her growing family and her own spiritual search. For years, she surfaced only in rare, unpredictable performances, becoming a kind of living legend, precisely because she refused to be available. Now 50, Lauryn Hill's absence from the screen and her sporadic presence in music read less like a disappearance than a deliberate act of resistance. She didn't vanish from a lack of talent. She vanished from a surplus of conviction, unwilling to let the industry consume the very soul that made her art matter. For older audiences who have watched countless stars burn out or sell out, her story is a complicated lesson in boundaries. She chose to be a mother and a seeker, rather than a product. And while the world still begs for her return, the truth is, she already gave us enough to last several lifetimes. Sly Stone. Few artists ever reshaped American music as completely as Sly Stone, and fewer still vanished so thoroughly afterward. Born Sylvester Stewart in 1943, he built Sly and the Family Stone into a revolution you could dance to, the first major American rock band to be fully integrated by race and gender, fusing funk, soul, gospel, and psychedelic rock into something the world had never heard. Hits like Everyday People, Dance to the Music, and Family Affair made him a defining voice of a generation, and the band's dawn performance at Woodstock in 1969 became one of the most legendary moments in concert history. He was also a striking screen presence, captured forever in the Woodstock film. But beginning in the late 1970s, one of music's brightest minds began a long retreat into isolation and personal struggle. For decades he was a ghost, appearing for mere seconds at his 1993 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction before disappearing again, and at his lowest point, reportedly living in a van in Los Angeles. Yet his story did not end in the shadows. In 2023, he published a candid memoir, offering a rare glimpse into his silent years, and revealed a man who had chosen withdrawal over compromising his spirit. Sly Stone died on June 9, 2025, in Los Angeles, at 82, after a prolonged battle with COVID, passing peacefully surrounded by his family, who revealed he had just completed a screenplay of his life story. For the generations who danced to his music and believed in its message of unity, his passing closed the book on a true American original, a man who protected what was left of his soul from a world that wanted to consume it whole. Jack Davidson. In the entire glittering history of Hollywood, few debuts have ever been as baffling, or as brief by design, as that of J. Davidson. In 1992, this British stylist was discovered almost by accident at a party. With no acting ambitions whatsoever, and cast as Dill in Neil Jordan's The Crying Game. His performance, anchoring one of the most famous twists in cinema, was so quietly extraordinary that it earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and made him the first Black British performer ever nominated for an Oscar. For almost anyone else, that night would have launched a lifelong chase for stardom. For Davidson, the spotlight felt like a cage. He famously tried to sabotage his one other major role, in the 1994 blockbuster Stargate, by demanding an astronomical $1 million salary he was certain the producers would refuse. To his genuine surprise, they simply agreed. He delivered a chilling, iconic turn as the sun god Ra, and then, at the absolute peak of his commercial and critical power, he did the unthinkable. He vanished. There were no scandals, no meltdowns, just a quiet, deliberate exit. Now 57, J. Davidson remains the ultimate ghost of Hollywood, having returned to his roots in the fashion industry as a stylist, working far from the cameras and refusing, for over 3 decades, to be pulled back. For older viewers who still remember the shock of first seeing him on screen, his disappearance is a powerful reminder that success is not always measured in fame. He chose privacy over prestige, proving that sometimes the most courageous thing an artist can do is walk away while the whole world is still screaming for more. Calvin Lockhart. Long before Black excellence was ever a phrase, Calvin Lockhart embodied it. For the generation that came of age during the cultural awakening of the late 1960s and early 70s, he was the very definition of masculine sophistication and screen power. Born in Nassau, the Bahamas, in 1934, and trained in the prestigious theaters of London, he brought an aristocratic, commanding presence to every role he touched. As the smooth-talking Biggie Smalls in Cotton comes to Harlem, and starring alongside Sidney Poitier in Uptown Saturday Night, he was, in the language of the era, fine as wine and twice as talented. Hollywood openly wondered whether he could become the first Black James Bond, and his mere glance could command an entire frame. But Lockhart possessed a soul too expansive for the narrow, stereotyped boxes the industry kept trying to fit him into. Even after a memorable late turn as the Voodoo King Willie in Predator 2 in 1990, he grew weary of an industry that still struggled to see a black man as anything more than a type. Rather than fight a losing battle for dignity in a city that undervalued his depth, he performed the ultimate act of self-respect. He walked away entirely. He didn't merely leave Los Angeles. He left the United States, returning home to Nassau, where he spent his final decade in near-total invisibility to American audiences, focused on family and community. When he died in 2007 at 72, from complications following a stroke, many in the States were stunned to learn he had been living a quiet, peaceful life for years. His disappearance was never a defeat. It was a homecoming, a king reclaiming a throne in a kingdom entirely his own. Leon Robinson. If you watched Black cinema in the 1990s, you didn't just know Leon. You felt his magnetism radiate off the screen. Known professionally by his first name alone, Leon Robinson was the undisputed heartthrob of a generation. Whether he was the charismatic lead singer JT in The Five Heartbeats, the determined sprinter Darice Bannock in Cool Runnings, or the seductive David Ruffin in the acclaimed miniseries The Temptations, he carried a leading man energy that felt at once classic and modern. He was the man women adored and men admired, versatile enough to play a saint or a sinner with equal conviction, gracing magazine covers and seeming destined for the same heights as Denzel Washington or Wesley Snipes. But as the new millennium dawned, Leon executed a vanishing act as smooth as his screen presence. There was no public downfall, no string of flops. Instead, he made a conscious choice to shift his focus. Tired of the narrow roles being offered to aging leading men, he pivoted toward his other great passion, music. As the frontman of his band, Leon and the Peoples, he traded the high-pressure grind of Hollywood sets for the intimate, authentic connection of a live stage, touring and recording on his own terms. He never left the arts. He simply moved to a room where the light felt more natural to him. Now 64, Leon Robinson is the picture of a man who aged with grace and intention. still taking occasional roles in independent film and television, while staying far from the A-list machinery and the manufactured headlines. He didn't vanish because he was forgotten. He vanished because he grew up and took his bow at exactly the right moment. Lorenzo Tucker. To understand how far back black stardom truly reaches, you have to meet Lorenzo Tucker, a matinee idol from an era most viewers have never even heard of. In the 1920s and 30s, long before the civil rights movement, Tucker was a titan of race films, the movies made by and for black audiences during the age of segregation, when mainstream Hollywood offered black performers almost nothing but caricature. Nicknamed the Black Valentino, he was a leading man of remarkable poise and striking looks, starring in classics like The Duke is Tops, and working repeatedly with the pioneering black filmmaker Oscar Micheaux. He played the sophisticated, romantic roles that white Hollywood flatly denied to black men, proving that black audiences craved and deserved heroes who looked like them. But as the 1940s drew to a close and the film industry began to shift, Tucker performed one of the most dignified vanishing acts in all of entertainment history. He didn't fade into bitterness or scramble for scraps in a changing Hollywood. He simply stopped, walking away from the camera and transitioning into an entirely different life. He served in the military during World War II and later worked in a range of professional roles, including as a mortician. For nearly 4 decades, a man who had once been a heartthrob to millions lived quietly among ordinary citizens, most of whom had no idea a cinema pioneer was in their midst. When Lorenzo Tucker died in 1986 at the age of 79, he had been off the screen for almost half a century. He remains the elegant foundation of cool that nearly every black leading man since has quietly stood upon. Lark Voorhees. For anyone who came of age in the late 80s and early 90s, the name Lark Voorhees carries a very specific kind of nostalgia. As Lisa Turtle on the hit sitcom Saved by the Bell, she was the effortlessly stylish, witty, and radiant it girl of Bayside High. And far more than that, she was a rare and meaningful sight for young black girls who almost never saw themselves reflected with such confidence in mainstream television. But when the show's final bell rang in 1993, the bright lights that had embraced her slowly began to cast longer, more complicated shadows. While many of her co-stars moved smoothly into lifelong careers, Voorhees' path took a puzzling turn toward seclusion. She made brief appearances in soap operas like Days of Our Lives and The Bold and the Beautiful, but her roles dwindled through the late 90s, and by the mid-2000s, she had almost entirely stepped away from the industry. The reality behind that quiet retreat was far more human than the tabloid speculation that sometimes followed her. In 2012, her mother shared publicly that Lark had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and that the relentless pressure of Hollywood had become extraordinarily difficult to navigate. Now 52, she is not a cautionary tale, but a woman who stepped back to protect her own sense of self. Being excluded from the 2020 Saved by the Bell reboot stung her longtime fans, though she did eventually make a brief, welcome cameo. Her story is a gentle, sobering reminder that the people who bring us the most joy on screen are so often fighting private battles, and that the kindest response we can offer is never speculation, but respect. Misty Upham. The story of Misty Upham is not simply a disappearance. It is a tragedy that still echoes through Indian country. A proud member of the Blackfeet Nation, she brought a raw, haunting authenticity to every role, earning acclaim for her powerhouse performances in Frozen River and, alongside Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts, in August, Osage County. She was also a fierce advocate for Native American representation, using her rising platform to speak for communities the industry routinely ignored. But behind that formidable talent, she was carrying deep personal pain and health struggles. In October 2014, the industry was shaken when news broke that Misty had gone missing from her family's care in Auburn, Washington. For 11 agonizing days, her family searched and pleaded, openly criticizing what they felt was a troubling lack of urgency from authorities, a frustration many Indigenous families know all too well. On October 16th, a search party organized by her own loved ones found her body at the bottom of a steep ravine near the White River. She was only 32. The official ruling was blunt force trauma from an accidental fall, though her family has continued to raise questions about her final days, and her case drew national attention to the wider crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Out of respect for her, and for the uncertainty that remains, her death is best remembered through that official finding held alongside her family's unanswered questions, rather than through speculation. Misty Upham didn't merely vanish from our screens. She was taken from a world that had only just begun to appreciate her brilliance. She remains a symbol of both immense talent and the systemic neglect that too often haunts the most marginalized voices among us. Merlin Santana. There is a particular grief that comes with watching a young life cut short, just as it begins to bloom. For anyone who watched the Steve Harvey Show in the late 1990s, Merlin Santana was pure charisma in motion. As Romeo Santana, he had a natural charm and comedic instinct that promised a long and legendary career. The kind of effortlessly cool, handsome young talent everyone wanted as a friend. Having started as a child on The Cosby Show, he had already navigated the treacherous currents of young fame and seemed fully ready to step forward as a serious adult actor, with a film career just beginning to open in front of him. But on the night of November 9, 2002, in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles, the laughter stopped. While sitting in the passenger seat of a parked car, Merlin was shot and killed. He was only 26 years old. This was never a story of a star lost to the cliches of the Hollywood lifestyle. It was a devastating collision of talent and a sudden, senseless act of violence. The legal proceedings that followed revealed a tragic case set in motion by false accusations from a teenage girl, leading to lengthy prison sentences for the two men responsible. But no verdict could restore the light he brought into living rooms across the country. For older viewers, remembering Merlin Santana is a somber meditation on how fragile a bright future can be. He didn't fade from the screen or choose to walk away. He was stolen from it, at the very moment he was becoming a leading man. He remains frozen in time, forever 26, forever charismatic, one of the most painful what-ifs in entertainment history. Sean Nelson. In 1994, a young boy delivered a performance that many critics still consider one of the greatest pieces of child acting ever committed to film. In the gritty drama Fresh, Sean Nelson played a 12-year-old boy navigating the brutal drug trade of Brooklyn with a chess player's cold, calculating intelligence. The film is literally built around the game, and he held the screen with a stoicism and emotional depth that outshone even his veteran co-star Samuel L. Jackson. Insiders openly whispered that they were watching the next Denzel Washington. He had the world at his feet. Yet as he grew older, the path to superstardom seemed to lead toward a destination he simply didn't want. Unlike the familiar tales of child stars lost to addiction or scandal, Sean's departure from the screen was a slow, quiet fade. After a handful of roles in the late 90s, including a stint on The Secret World of Alex Mack, the credits simply stopped. He didn't fall into Hollywood's traps. He deliberately stepped out of the frame. Now 44, Sean Nelson has built a private life entirely away from the pressures of being a prodigy. For a generation that watched him as a brilliant child, his absence is often mistaken for failure. But in truth, he achieved something rarer than any award. He survived his own fame and chose to be a person rather than a product. While the industry may mourn the loss of a great actor, we can celebrate the quiet success of a man who found peace outside the lens. His story is a lesson for all of us. The most important role you ever play is the one you live, when the cameras are off. Jason Bernard. Jason Bernard was the kind of actor who made you feel safe the moment he walked into a scene. For a whole generation of viewers, he was the reassuring face of authority and wisdom, the intense investigator in war games, the steady presence across countless dramas, a working actor's working actor whose gravitas and rich, booming voice brought instant weight to everything he touched. Born in Chicago in 1938, he built a career of more than 100 credits, moving fluidly between comedy and drama, and quietly elevating every production lucky enough to have him. He never needed flashy leading roles to leave his mark. He was the dependable backbone of 80s and 90s television, a living bridge between the era of classic character acting and the modern age. But in the mid-1990s, His vanishing came in a way that was both sudden and quiet. Shortly after filming his wonderfully exasperated turn as the judge in the hit Jim Carrey comedy Liar Liar, Jason Bernard suffered a fatal heart attack in October 1996, at the age of 58. What makes his disappearance so poignant isn't the death itself, but the silence that followed it. There were no sprawling televised tributes, no star-studded memorials covered by every outlet. It was as if the industry he had faithfully served for decades simply turned the page. For the viewers who welcomed him into their homes year after year, his absence is a subtle, lingering ache. He didn't vanish into scandal. He vanished into the fog of Hollywood's short memory. Yet his work still speaks for him, warm and familiar as a favorite rerun, proof that you never needed the headlines to become a quiet legend in someone's living room. Yvonne Hudson. Of all the names on this list, Yvonne Hudson may be the most genuinely mysterious. A woman who made real history and then erased herself so completely, it's as if she stepped through a hidden door. In 1980, during Saturday Night Live's famously chaotic sixth season, she became the first black woman ever to join the cast, arriving at a moment of enormous transition and pressure, right after the entire original ensemble had departed and the show was fighting for its very survival. She had already appeared on the show in smaller parts before earning that status, and she navigated a high-stakes, often unwelcoming environment inside Studio 8H, frequently sharing the screen with a young Eddie Murphy. When that turbulent season ended and most of the cast was let go, Hudson remarkably stayed on in bit parts until around 1984, and then she vanished, not just from the show but from the entire industry. There are no acting credits after 1984, no guest spots, no plays, no memoir, no interviews about those legendary years, and no social media presence of any kind. Now around 70, she exists almost as a digital ghost. Most SNL alumni, even minor ones, spend decades trading on that credential to build careers. Hudson chose total anonymity instead, becoming the ultimate missing person of television history. A woman who broke a major glass ceiling and then walked away so thoroughly it's nearly as if she was never there. Her story is the purest form of vanishing. She gave the world her talent for one brief, historic moment, then quietly reclaimed her entire life, leaving behind only grainy footage and a legacy of dignified, unbroken silence. Brandon Hammond. If you loved black cinema in the 1990s, you knew Brandon Hammond's face, the soulful eyes and gentle voice that seemed to belong to an entire decade of family films. Most famously, as young Ahmad in the 1997 classic Soul Food, he did something few child actors could. He served as the emotional narrator and beating heart of an ensemble stacked with heavyweights like Vanessa Williams and Vivica A. Fox, holding the whole story together as a boy trying to preserve his family's Sunday traditions after the loss of Big Mama. From Waiting to Exhale to Space Jam, he was the little brother of the industry, a child prodigy with a wisdom that felt far beyond his years. But as the 90s gave way to a new decade, the boy who seemed destined for superstardom simply stopped appearing. There was no scandal, no public downfall, no cautionary headline. Instead, Brandon Hammond achieved something even rarer in Hollywood, a clean, dignified break. As he grew into a young man, the roles offered no longer matched the depth he had shown, and rather than chase diminishing parts, he chose to step out of the frame entirely. Now 42, he is a man who reclaimed his own identity on his own terms. Even as fans still post, "Where is he now?" Every time Soul Food airs, he has spent 2 decades living far from the red carpets, quietly pursuing writing and directing behind the scenes, and finishing his education. For older audiences, his is a beautiful and rare success story. The child star who grew up, held his head high, and decided his worth was never defined by a box office number. Lamont Bentley. For anyone who spent their Tuesday nights in the late 90s watching Moesha, Lamont Bentley was a reliable source of pure joy. As Hakeem Campbell, Moesha's neighbor and closest friend, he brought a charisma and comedic timing that quickly made him a breakout star of the UPN network, the boy next door with a mischievous grin, who could pivot from a punchline to real vulnerability in a single beat. And there was far more range in him than the sitcom let most people see. His turn as the militant H. Rap Brown in the film Panther revealed an actor with the dramatic weight and political consciousness to become a serious force. But the quiet tragedy of Lamont Bentley is that he was in the middle of a voluntary reinvention when life made his disappearance permanent. By 2005, those close to him recalled that he had grown disillusioned with Hollywood and felt boxed in as a comedic sidekick, hungry to be seen as a full man, and drawn back toward his first love, music. He was keeping a lower profile, spending more time with his two young daughters, and preparing for a new chapter. That transformation was cut short on January 19, 2005, when his car went over an embankment in Ventura County, ending his life at just 31. He was gone not from any lack of work, but while reaching for something deeper, only for the journey to end in a sudden, heartbreaking accident. For the parents and grandparents who watched their own children grow up alongside him on screen, his loss felt like losing family. He didn't fade away. He was snatched away, leaving an unfinished legacy and a smile that will never age. Lloyd Avery II. Some performances are so convincing that the line between the actor and the role grows dangerously, tragically thin. Lloyd Avery II remains the most sobering example in modern black cinema. In John Singleton's 1991 masterpiece Boys on the Hood, he appeared in only a handful of scenes as the young man in the red car who pulls the trigger on Ricky, a moment so chilling, delivered with such a cold, vacant authenticity that it seared itself into a generation's memory. Hollywood looked at this 22-year-old from a middle-class family in View Park and saw a rising talent who could bring a dangerous realism to the screen. He took a few more roles, in Poetic Justice and Don't Be a Menace, but then something dark happened. Rather than using his platform to escape the world he portrayed, Avery was pulled into it. He moved into a notorious South Central neighborhood and became involved in gang life, no longer a visitor to that world, but a participant. In 1999, the man who had played a killer on screen was arrested for a real-life double homicide and was sentenced to life in prison. The final chapter is the most haunting of all. In 2005, at the age of 36, Lloyd Avery II was killed in his cell at Pelican Bay State Prison by his cellmate. It was a brutal, lonely end for a man who once had the world at his fingertips. His story is a genuine tragedy. A gifted young performer consumed by the very reality his art had tried to warn us about. A reminder that the shadows we see on screen are sometimes far closer than they appear. Sheldon Turnipseed. In the early 1990s, the PBS series Ghostwriter was a quietly revolutionary piece of television, following a diverse group of Brooklyn kids who solved neighborhood mysteries and, in the process, taught a generation that literacy could be a genuine superpower. At the very center of that group was Jamal Jenkins, played by a young, charismatic actor named Sheldon Turnipseed. Jamal was the heart of the team, brave, intelligent, and deeply loyal. And for the parents and grandparents of that era, he was exactly the kind of thoughtful, grounded young man they hoped their own children might emulate. He wasn't a caricature. He made being smart and curious look effortlessly cool. When Ghostwriter ended its successful run in 1995, the industry fully expected Sheldon to step into the next phase of a lucrative career, armed with experience, name recognition, and obvious talent. Instead, he performed a disappearing act that would have puzzled even the mysterious ghost he once chased across the screen. He didn't take another role. He didn't pursue music. He simply stepped out of the public eye and never looked back. Now 48, Sheldon exists mainly in the warm, grainy reruns of 90s educational television. While a co-star like Julia Stiles went on to major Hollywood fame, he reportedly chose to focus on his education and build a stable career far removed from entertainment. For older audiences, his story is a refreshing counterpoint to the troubled child star narrative. He vanished not because of scandal or hardship, but because he seemed to have said everything he needed to say through his art by the age of 15, and then chose a quiet, contented life entirely his own. Clifton Powell Jr. In Hollywood, a famous last name is often treated as a golden ticket. which makes the choice Clifton Powell Jr. made all the more striking. He is the son of the legendary character actor Clifton Powell, whose face has appeared in well over 100 films, from Ray to Rush Hour, and for a brief moment in the early 2000s, it seemed the younger Clifton was destined to inherit the family trade. He had his father's natural presence and ease in front of the camera, appearing in a few small roles that hinted at a promising path, and the industry stood ready to welcome him as the next generation of a working actor dynasty. But Clifton Powell Jr. performed a vanishing act, born not of failure, but of a determination to build his own identity. He didn't want to be Clifton's son in every audition room, and he had genuine passions elsewhere, in basketball and technology, fields where a famous surname couldn't sink a shot or write a line of code. He played college basketball at UC Santa Barbara, and as he matured, he made a deliberate choice to step away from entertainment entirely. Now in his late 20s, he has built a life as a businessman and tech entrepreneur, far from the red carpets, and has held a firm boundary with Hollywood, declining to return to acting despite his pedigree. For older viewers who admire a young person with the courage to forge an independent path, his story is a genuine breath of fresh air, proof that a legacy isn't something you simply inherit, it's something you build for yourself. 19 names, 19 vanishing acts, and one question underneath every single one. Is the price of fame really worth the cost of your peace? Some found freedom in the silence. Jay Davidson chose privacy over an Oscar's promise. Lauryn Hill chose her soul over the spotlight. Brandon Hammond simply grew up and walked away with his head high. Others were taken far too soon, by tragedy, by violence, by illness no amount of talent could hold back. So tell us honestly, did they walk away to save themselves? Or did Hollywood quietly discard them the moment the lights grew dim? Which of them do you miss the most? Share their name below, and subscribe to Secret Celebrity Stories, where no legend is ever truly forgotten.